Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do my, oh my gosh, what month are we in? September, October. We are in September. So today I'm gonna be doing my August wrap up. I did a few reading vlogs in August where I featured, I don't know, the majority of these books, but there were a few that I didn't include in any of those videos. So I did just kind of want to do an overall wrap up. That's what it's called. It's a wrap up. I do have my coffee here with me, which I will be sipping on throughout. If anyone is wondering, my caffeine beverage of choice is a triple shot of espresso over ice with whipped cream. If you haven't tried it, try it. If you don't like sweet drinks, it's really good. Without further ado, I guess I will get started. Well, I guess I'm not getting started yet. I just want to say one more thing. I haven't been reading books, the type of books that I typically read of late. You know, your mental health is complicated, and sometimes having more like genre fiction type works are really, really important and fantastical routes of escapism. And I've kind of been enjoying that a little bit lately. Going forward, I can feel myself wanting to get back to the types of books that I typically read. I typically read mostly classics, whatever that means, but I typically read mostly classics, as you can see behind me. Now, without further ado, we'll get started. So I did do a weekend reading vlog featuring these 3 books, and I really enjoyed these for the most part. Okay, so these are the Emily Henry books. We have Book Lovers, People We Meet on Vacation, and Beach Read. I ended up giving Beach Read like a 3.5 stars, probably a solid 3. Book Lovers, I gave 5 stars when I read it. There's nothing about this book that has necessarily stuck with me up to this point, but the reading experience while reading it was a 5-star experience. So whatever that means to you, I think this is great. Book Lovers, we follow 2 people who work in the book industry. So we follow an editor and we follow a book agent. So our main protagonist named Nora and our love interest Charlie. So Charlie is the editor and Nora is the agent. And they are workaholics. Their archetypes are like the bad people, basically. The exes they're the people that the people dump in those Hallmark movies, you know, when they frolic off to small towns and fall in love with like poinsettia farmers and family bakery owners, you know what I mean? They're the people that people dump in the big cities because they don't know the true meaning of life. That's their character types. Anyways, so they're workaholics. Nora goes with her sister to a small town in North Carolina, and she runs into Charlie there, and they had like a feud in the past, kind of. They met each other once and they didn't like each other, and they fall in love, and it's really great. She's a very mature romance writer. I don't see like teenagers enjoying these books as much as like adults would enjoy these books. I was a big romance reader as a teenager, so that's why I like to add that in. Then we have People We Meet on Vacation, which is my least favorite of the 3. It was still a solid read, but we follow Poppy and Alex, and Poppy is like a party girl. She has major wanderlust. She's a social media influencer, and she influences like traveling. So she travels all the time. She works for like a magazine where she writes about going on trips. So, okay, whatever. But when she was in college, she met Alex, and he's a homebody and he's a teacher. Kind of get the present day storyline and their past storyline, where we meet them going on trips each summer for a few weeks. Yeah, going on trips for a few weeks each summer in the past, and something happened in the past, and that's where we're brought up to the present day where they're going on a trip to Palm Springs. It's really awkward, but then of course they fall in love. This is Friends to Lovers. For me, what I didn't care for about that book was it was incredibly slow burn. I was like, okay, get to the freaking point at one point. But I didn't like the travel vibe going on there. I prefer that small town vibe. I like it to be set in one cutesy, that's cute and cozy combined, by the way. But I like it, like the story set in one cute and cozy place, and that was not. But Book Lovers and Beach Read were, so that leads us to Beach Read, which I gave, again, 3.5, 3-ish stars to. And this is set in a small town, kind of, is it by a lake or is it by the ocean? I don't know. I think it's a lake. We follow our 2 protagonists, August, Augustus, and January. I'm not good at remembering character names. Who is? I'm so sorry. They end up, stuff happens, they end up being neighbors in this small town on a, like, by a lake. They were enemies. They were rival creative writing students in college, and they're neighbors now, and they fall in love, okay? Of course they fall in love. So those are the Emily Henry books. Let's move swiftly on. And then I did a video where I read manga for the first time. Okay, so this month I discovered manga. Well, okay, I discovered manga in July, and I got kind of really intrigued. I watched a lot of videos about people talking about manga because I did not know. I was very unfamiliar. I didn't know what was going on there. So, like, I've read graphic novels in the past, but I've never experienced manga. They're very similar, but anyway. I was really intrigued. I love the experience. I love the experience of reading graphic novels. You just sit down, it's very immersive because you have the pictures and then you have the words, and you don't think at first that it's gonna feel like a full story, but it fucking does, man. It's just so good. And you sit down and you start reading, and then the next thing you know, it's like 45 minutes later and you finish, and you're just like, oh my gosh. I just went through that whole emotional experience, and it was so fun, and it was so delightful, and within the course of like an hour, give or take. I love it for that reason, and the art style just adds to it. So I've really been enjoying kind of delving into the world of manga. I feel like they're gonna be really fantastic palette cleansers for me going forward. Yeah, I read a couple more than I did in that video, so okay, we'll talk about those. So I did end up picking up the Apothecary Diaries. So I read volume 1 and volume 2, and I would definitely be interested in continuing this series. I still want to try a few other more popular series before I invest in the rest of these because I liked them, but they didn't blow my mind, if you know what I mean. These were really cute, really delightful. We follow our main character, Mao Mao. She's like an apothecary, but she was kidnapped one day, and now she's working in the Imperial Palace as a serving girl, basically. She ends up becoming like a lady's maid to one of the really important courtesans, and she ends up being like a poison food taster, and it's very episodic, and there's lots of mysteries, like mini mysteries going on in this Imperial Palace setting with all of these women, little drama moments, and she kind of solves the problems, basically. I think that it's really cute. So those are those. And then I picked up Fruits Basket. So this was in that video that I did, and I didn't love this. It just didn't fully work for me. I know this is super popular, but I didn't fully love it. But we follow our main character, who's now an orphan, basically. She's living like in this tent, and she one day runs into these boys who are a part of this larger, mysterious Cullen-like family, and one of the boys goes to her. Does he go to an all-girls school with her? I don't know. She like goes to school, and I think it's an all-girls school, but this one boy goes there for some reason. She ends up connecting with this family of boys who are magical, okay? They're mysterious, but they're magical. So whenever they get stressed out or touch a girl, they turn into an animal from the Chinese zodiac. And it's about found family and friendship, recognizing and appreciating your own personal strengths and power, and not being envious of other people's strengths. The art style didn't work for me. Something about the tone of the writing didn't work for me. I wonder if that has anything to do with the translation. I will not be continuing, but I could see why people do love this, but it just wasn't for me. And then we did Spy Family, which I loved. Okay, and I've been trying to find the 3rd volume, but it looks like it's unavailable everywhere until the end of September, so the end of this month. So I guess I'll have to wait for that. So we have Spy Family Volume 1 and Spy Family Volume 2. Oh my gosh, look at how cute she is. Are you seeing this? Look at how cute. Coffee break. Oh my god, that tastes so good. So we follow our main character, which is this dude. He's a spy. His name is Twilight. His spy name is Twilight. But he is tasked, he's like a fantastic spy, okay? And he is tasked this mission to get close to this important dude in the government who no one can seem to get around him because he's very elusive. His son goes to this prestigious prep school that's really hard to get into, and the only way that people have seen this guy is like at functions for this prestigious, really hard to get into prep school. This dude, Twilight, is basically like, okay, well now I have to get a kid and a wife. So he goes and adopts a kid, and he adopts this little girl who he doesn't know but is a telepath. He's trying to get her into the school, but he needs a wife, so he finds this woman who is, he doesn't know, but is an assassin. She's in the middle there. Can you see? Is it focusing? I don't know. There you go. Who is an assassin, and they become this family, and antics ensue, and they're trying to get Anya into this boarding school. Spoiler alert, she gets into the boarding school, and then I'm assuming antics are gonna continue to ensue from there. Super cute. Again, I really want to get my hands on volume 3, but it's just been unavailable everywhere I've been looking. So there's that. Then we did, which was my absolute favorite of the manga that I've read, Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, volume 1. We follow Frieren. She's like this elf. She's like an immortal elven mage. In the beginning of this book, they're coming back from like a long journey quest that they went on to like banish darkness from the kingdom. They come back and they're like, what do we do from here? And Frieren, since she's immortal, she's gonna outlive all of these people. All of her friends that she had this really amazing experience with, or they had this really connecting experience with her, they start to die, and she has a different type of relationship with people, and she kind of takes time and people's time for granted, and she has to learn kind of the importance of connection, friendship, and time, basically. She gains an apprentice along the way, and it's just really beautiful, and there were really some really beautiful moments in this. All right, now where do we go from here? The question of life. August was Woman in Translation month. I did a vlog reading books recommended by Elena Ferrante for Woman in Translation month. I ended up reading 3 books in that video, but earlier in the month I did read a couple others, so we'll talk about those here. So I read The Door by Magee, which is translated from the Hungarian by Len Rix. Now, this book, I really, really, really liked it. I can tell that Magee is a very intelligent writer, and I feel like, for me, before I tell you kind of the plot of this book, I feel like for me, I need to reread this, because I feel like I kind of missed a little bit of the point after my first read, and so I feel like I would definitely benefit from a reread. But basically, this was written and published while Hungary was under communist rule. So, you know, you can't be too overt in your critiques of the government at that time, obviously. And in the beginning of this book, so we follow our narrator. She is an author, and her name is Magda, so maybe self-insert there a little bit. In the beginning, we hear that she was she's now able to start writing again because her work no longer being as heavily censored, I believe is what she said. So we see our character in here is talking about censorship. So that's obviously going to be an undertone throughout the whole story, basically, or it's telling us something, right? Our woman writer, she's referred to as the woman writer, she's wealthy and she needs to get a housekeeper. So that's kind of where we meet the focal point of our story, is her housekeeper, Emrance. And it's about their relationship, and it's about the town's relationship with Emrance. It's about Emrance as a character. And I wonder, because the introduction of this edition, which is the NYRB edition, has like a 2-page introduction by Allie Smith. I love Allie Smith. She says, and she doesn't elaborate on it, but she says that Emrance probably represents Hungary. And I didn't put that together on my first read, or I was ruminating on it, right? But after the fact, actually, when I was editing that vlog that I did, I feel like, and again, this is why I want to reread it, but I feel like Emrance was Hungary in that, you know, being under communist rule, perhaps she was the ideal citizen. She was extremely hardworking, to say the least, and she completely rejected any sort of personal connection with anyone at all. There was a point in this book where she has a stroke and she is unable to help anyone, let alone herself, or she's unable to help herself, let alone anyone else. And she locks herself up in her house that no one's seen the inside of before, because again, she completely rejects any sort of personal connection or anything like that. She's ashamed of not being able to be this really strong hard worker anymore, this character. I think that's I just feel like I really need to reread this book. But it was really well done. I would really recommend it. If it sounds interesting to you at all, I know a lot of people love this book. I know a lot of people love Magda Sabo. I would be interested to read some of her other works. I don't necessarily know if the tone of her writing, like, she's not going to be my personal favorite author of all time, and there are other authors out there that I'm more interested to read their back catalog of. I would be interested, and I do want to reread this. And then I read The Passion According to G.H. by Clarice Lispector, and I love this woman. I just love this woman. I talk about this book for quite a while in that blog, but this literally is exactly what it says on the back. It's about this woman who's living in an apartment, and she is another wealthy woman, and she goes into her housekeeper's room and she opens up a cabinet and she sees in there a cockroach, and I think she kills the cockroach, or she sees a cockroach die, and then she sits down, and that's like the first 25 pages, and the rest of this 200-page book is just her thinking, like really spiraling thoughts just about life. And there's no plot to this book. Absolutely no plot. I gave this 4 stars just because I feel like it was a little bit rambly at times. It didn't need to be 200 pages, but it was beautiful. So if you're into no plots, if you're into people just thinking very philosophically with like seemingly no direction, then I think this is for you. I really liked it. And then we have A Girl Returned by Donatella Di Petrantonio, translated from the Italian by Anne Goldstein, and I loved this. So I give this 5 stars. It's very short, which I love too. And we follow this young girl who when she was born, she was given to an aunt to be raised because the aunt had more money, and her birth mother, they didn't have any money, and they had a lot of children, and the aunt wanted a child. She was unable to have a child, so she was given to this aunt who has raised her from birth, basically. So that's her mother. And I think she's about 13 at the time that she's then returned to her birth mother, and she doesn't know why she's being given back, and she has to try to connect with her other mother and all of her many siblings, and kind of deal with living this new life where before she lived in the middle class, basically, and she was very comfortable. She went to the country club, and now they sometimes don't have enough to eat, and they have no money, basically. So it's about that class divide. And it's about mothers and daughters and sisters. It's very, very big about sisters, because she has a really beautiful connection with her younger sister. Interesting relationship with one of her older brothers, which made me quite uncomfortable, if you get where I'm going with there. But I thought that it was interesting. It made me uncomfortable, but it was interesting, okay? Because she was not raised with these people, but they're completely her full blood relatives. I think people need to read this. I thought that this was really good, okay? And then I have The Lover by Marguerite Duras, which is translated from the French by Barbara Bray, and this hasn't stuck with me. I will say that. So while I was reading this, I felt like it was pretty emotionally powerful. So we followed this, but again, it hasn't stuck with me at all. So I don't know, man. We followed this young girl who was living in Saigon, and her family's French, and she has this romantic, erotic relationship with this older Chinese man who has a lot of money, and her family doesn't have any money, but they want to have a lot of money, so they kind of act like they do, you know what I mean? And it's also about her relationship with her siblings and her mother, and her relationship that she has with this man that she's in this relationship with. It's very non-linear. So at one point, you're with her when she's about 17, well, how old is she? Like 6? She's a teenager, and she's experiencing these things with her mother or with this man. And then at another point, she's discussing the fact, or she mentions her 50-year-old son, or her 20-something-year-old son, I forget the age. She's mentioning her brother and the fact that one of her brothers had died, but then we see her with her brother and her family having a meal together right after that. So it's very non-linear. It jumps around quite a bit. She has like that depressive, melancholic tone, which I really vibe with in literature and in books in general. Really liked it at the time of reading it, but for, again, some reason it just didn't stick with me. But I think that if you're interested in reading something with a very sensual tone to it, so like how melancholy can almost feel sensual, sadness can feel sensual, because we're really living with and feeling with all of our deepest feelings, basically, kind of paralleled with the fact that she's having this physical erotic experience with this man, and she can see him admiring her, and she likes seeing someone admire her. It's very sensual. And so if that intrigues you at all, I think that you'd like this. It's also very short, so. And then we also have Fieldwork in Ukrainian Sex by Oksana Zabushko, translated by Helena Hearn, is another one that did not stick in my brain. But this was very stream of consciousness, and we follow our main character, our narrator, who is a poet, like our author here. And she's recounting her tumultuous relationship with this man in the Ukraine, with her lover in the Ukraine. And now she's living in the East Coast of the United States, and she's kind of living in academia, but she's a poet. She's talking about her relationship with her country and the language of her country, and how people want her to be speaking in Russian, and how her language is, and the experience of her country is overlooked, kind of. This is another one that has it has an almost angry tone to it, but not an aggressive, angry tone to it. It's a woman who knows herself. Like, she's a very strong woman. She's been through things that have, I don't want to say calloused her to a degree, but almost. And so we see that she is very capable, but she's also very sad, because the world can be quite sad, and what she's been through has left her quite sad. But she's angry and melancholy at the same time, and I think that it's a really interesting perspective to read from and to feel alongside. So if that sounds interesting to you, then go for it. Again, it's just something else that hasn't fully stuck with me. What else? So I think those are all the books that I've mentioned in videos. Moving on. I read, which, oh my gosh, I loved this so much. I picked this up on a whim in Barnes & Noble, and this is Karl Knausgard's Why I Write. Okay, no, I think it's actually just called Inadvertent, but it says Why I Write up there. Super short nonfiction writing. This was in the literary criticism section of the bookstore. So he's writing about books that he's liked. He's writing about being a writer. He's writing about what art means to him, what good art is. And you hear him talk about Edvard Munch. What's his name? Munch, the guy who painted The Scream. I'll insert it somewhere. He's writing about him and how people in his lifetime maybe didn't understand at first, but how when you're an artist, you have to be inadvertent to reach the authentic, unique voice or piece within yourself. You have to be inadvertent to be able to reach that, and then to be able to get it out, because otherwise you're going to overthink it, or try to be something else, or try to be what you think should be said. You're going to filter yourself, basically. And he's talking about how that painter, and other authors as well, he writes about Tolstoy in here too, but other artists of different mediums who he feels like when he experiences their work, it's so unique, and they take up the whole page or canvas and really express something that feels so unique to them, and how that is where the power is, and that is what true art is. And it's about his experience trying to get to that place within himself. It's about him talking about being a young writer who had to keep rewriting and was told that he was bad, and his kind of journey to having confidence in himself, or to getting published, essentially. And I just really loved this. I love his whole notion of being inadvertent, and I think any sort of artist should read this, or if you're an artist, read this. So that was great. And then this I just picked up because I was sitting in bed one day and didn't know what to do for half an hour. So The Sleeper and the Spindle The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Chris Riddell. And this is a fairy tale. This is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. This is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. It's a feminist retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but with beautiful, beautiful artwork. Chris Riddell is a very talented artist. And if you like fairy tales, I think that this is a good one to go for. It's a quick read. I think that it really twists the original story on its head. I just really liked it. I don't really want to, there's nothing else really to say about it. It was really good. We have this Penguin Little Black classic, this collection of poetry by Emily Bronte called The Night is Darkening Round Me. This is number 63 in this Little Black classic collection, and this I actually started reading months ago, because I typically, not always, I've read a couple poetry collections within a couple of days this month already in September, but I usually like to read poetry collections very slowly, like read one poem at a time at night, and then maybe when the spirit takes me and I feel like I need a poem. But this is something that I kept going back to and kept rereading the poems that I just loved. Emily Bronte really, I feel like, is a poet that speaks the same emotional language that I feel, you know? And I feel like that's the difficulty with poetry and poets sometimes, and I feel like poetry can be difficult for that reason, and it can make you feel, well, it makes me feel really stupid if you have this really famous poet. For example, a poet that I read recently is T.S. Eliot, that the voice didn't speak to me at all. And they're very important works in the Western canon, and you feel dumb if you don't understand it fully or really feel what so many other people have felt from that. So that's why I feel like poetry can be kind of difficult, but it is such an amazing, rewarding thing when you find a poet that really, you get it. Like, you just get it and you feel like you need it at certain points. And when you have such emotionally overwhelming moments, sometimes you need to go back to a specific poem that just kind of untangles those feelings for you in that moment, or sits with you with them. And I feel like Emily Bronte is definitely that for me. I'd love to get a larger collection of her poetry, but sometimes that overwhelms me. But yeah, Emily Dickinson is another one that I really, really like to go back to, and William Blake, but I love Emily Bronte, so there you go. And then, the last pile, I feel like I've been talking for a long time. My coffee is melting. Seriously, that is so good. It's just like bitter, but there's like a little bit of that creaminess to it from the whipped cream. Okay, so the last stack of books are books from the Booker Longlist. And I had a weird relationship with the Booker Longlist this year. I read 5 books off the 6, but 5 in August. I only really liked one of them. And so I was going to do a whole video kind of reviewing or talking about the 5 books that I'd read from that list, but then I sat down, I actually filmed it, and then I deleted it because I just felt like it was really negative, and I just really felt kind of apathetic towards most of them, or didn't like them, like actively disliked them, except for one. So we'll talk about those briefly because I don't want to talk about them for too long. I feel like I get so excited for prize lists. I get so excited for prize lists, and that hasn't died within me yet. And I feel like I want it to die within me, but it's hard. My feelings, I'm like Marianne from Sense and Sensibility. I'm just driven by my passions and feelings and emotions, okay? I just get so excited, but I feel like something that I'm learning about myself is that contemporary literary fiction, and there are exceptions to this, but they're few and far between. They're becoming more few and far between. Doesn't do it for me anymore. It just doesn't really do it for me anymore. That's all I'm gonna say. So we'll start with the first book on the pile, which is Booth by Karen Joy Fowler. I liked this just fine, but I didn't think that it was amazing. Like, I don't see, when you're talking about the Booker list, I feel like you need something, and I'm gonna sound like such a snob, and I don't mean to be, but whatever, here we are. I feel like I expect a work of literature that is nuanced and is poking a fine needle at something like an acute feeling, thought, or idea, but it is done in a masterful way. Like, the story is masterfully kind of cocooning that particular thought. Certainly that's not what we got here. It's not what we got in the next one that I'm about to talk about, but anyway, we follow the Booth family. Follow the Booth family living in America. They are just living their life. Like, this is so forgettable for me. I'm so sorry. I can't even. Like, we just follow his siblings and they talk about their life and the mom and the dad, and the dad was like a Shakespearean actor, and they start to lose a lot of their siblings because they got sick at that time. And there's a little bit mentioned about slavery at that time, but not really. And and then there's little moments where you hear about Abraham Lincoln moving up in his career. But I feel like the author, which, like, power to you if you want, I feel like she was just personally really interested in the Booths, and she wanted an excuse to kind of write about them for herself. And so she kind of threw random things in about Abraham Lincoln to make it more about the state of the country at that time. But it was really just her kind of writing about this family. I just felt weird to me, okay? It felt weird to me. My favorite thing about this book was hearing about the landscape around them at the time that they were living. So pre-Civil War, obviously, because right, Abraham Lincoln, okay? Just ultimately kind of forgettable. My grandma really loved that. She really likes historical fiction. So if you like historical fiction, you're probably gonna like this. And then we have Night Crawling by Layla Motley, which beautiful cover. This was fine. I don't see how this was listed. I just don't. I feel like the power of this book is in its unique perspective on life. We don't hear, or at least I haven't, we don't hear too many accounts of this kind of a life. Follow our main character who's living in Oakland, parents, or whose mom is in prison, I think, and her brother is older than her, but is not getting a job at all. He just wants to try to be a rapper, and her dad had passed away, so they have no money. She has no work, and she's trying to pay rent. She's trying to take care of someone. One of her neighbors is an addict, and she can't function at all, and she has a son, and so our main character is trying to also take care of the son. I think this could have been really powerful, but I think that the tone of the prose was lacking an immense amount of depth and feeling, and which is so sad to say, because the subject matter of this book is very emotional, or it could be very emotional and very hard-hitting, and she ends up becoming kind of like prostituting herself, and she becomes involved in a few police officers taking advantage of her, basically. Again, I just don't really think this was doing what people think that it was doing. I don't want to continue talking about this book because I feel bad, because I feel like I could see why people really love this, and I feel like this is important, but it was missing something. The unique perspective of the book was its power, but the writing was missing something that could have elevated it. There you go. But we have The Trees by Percival Everett. So this is set in Mississippi. We follow a lot of kind of like, I was gonna say like old-fashioned, deep Southern white family. We follow them, if that means anything to you. Some men start to appear brutally murdered, and next to some white bodies start to show up being like brutally murdered, and next to these white male bodies are black male bodies. They were both clearly murdered, and these people have these ideas about what happened and how these family members were murdered. I'm not giving a good description of this book. It's about kind of the history of lynching in the United States. It goes on with this mystery from there. Some cops come in and are trying to figure it out, and some of these bodies start to disappear. It reads like a Criminal Minds episode to me, or like an SVU episode, and I hate those types of shows. So it just didn't work for me. And then we have Maps of Our Spectacular Bodies by Maddie Mortimer. And this book grated on me. I know a lot of people really loved this book, but I know a lot of people also kind of disliked this book as well. I feel like it was overwritten. We follow our main character who is dealing with cancer. And she has a daughter, and it's about her daughter growing up. And we hear from the perspective of the cancer in her body, and we hear about her past and what it was like growing up in a religious household, and her kind of grappling with her questioning God, like, why do we suffer? Basically, like, why am I going through this? Do you exist? Are you there? That was probably my favorite layer to this book, was her kind of relationship with God. This book was overwritten. It had an interesting format, so you got some moments where you know, like different formatting was going on. The text and font was a little bit different, which was interesting. But I just don't want to say too much else about this because the book bothered me, and I feel like the writing was very impressed with itself. I feel bad. I know a lot of people really liked that. And then last but not least of my reading for August, we have The Colony by Audrey Magee, which 5 stars. I loved this book so much. I read it within a 24-hour period. This book was fantastic. It's set on this, I could talk about this for a really long time, but this video is already long enough, so I'm going to try not to. It's set on a small island off the coast of Ireland, and we follow this group of, I think it's like 40 people, and only one man, and who's a young boy named James, or Seamus is his Irish name, but James is his non-Irish name, his English name. He's the only boy left on this island. I think the rest of them are women, and it's the last place where the Irish language is spoken, and it is the main language spoken on this island. And in the beginning, we're introduced to one of our main characters, who's an artist. He's a painter, coming to this island to paint the cliffs. It's all about influence. This book is all about influence and how being influenced in evolution is inevitable. We can't stop it. It's inevitable. And we also have this character who is he French? I think he's a French dude, but he's a linguist specializing in this Irish language. And it is his personal mission in life to bring this Irish language back and to have it retain its integrity, to have it not be influenced by the English language at all. And so he's really pissed that this Englishman artist is coming to this island to paint the cliffs. It's all about perspective as well. It was so brilliant. I love, there's moments in here with historical digression. So you hear about King Henry VIII and how when King Henry VIII kind of took over and Ireland was, how language just shapes class, and how when the English language came over to Ireland, everyone was expected to speak English, so if you couldn't get work, or you became a farmer and therefore you became a second-class citizen. All these people who were like doctors, lawyers, teachers, the barristers of this country spoke the English language, and if you couldn't speak the English language, again, like I said, you couldn't get work. That's so fascinating to me. And then there's another point of digression in this book where our linguist is looking at the oldest woman on this island who has had no changes to her speaking Irish. And she talks about her childhood growing up on the island, which is very idyllic, and was I cried. Okay, it was beautiful. We hear the linguist talking about the inevitable, which I don't think that he realizes it because he's so stubbornly adamant about retaining the integrity of this language and having no kind of evolution of speech to be prevalent at all. And he's talking about the evolution of thought when he's looking at this older woman of these philosophical thinkers, and how all of their thinking then influenced the next philosophers. And again, how evolution is inevitable. And it's just such a beautiful book. And then last thing I'll say, another moment where there's historical digression about when the Vikings came, their language had shaped the Irish language at that time to become what the Irish language was then, and how it's now being shaped by English. That might not sound interesting, but this was just so good, and it was so well written. And James, or Seamus, James he likes to be called, was the young boy on this island who wanted to escape this island and become a painter. I loved this book. So this is my favorite of the Booker list, if you can't tell. So those are all the books that I have read, or that I had read, let me move this, in the month of August. And before I leave you today, I would love to read my favorite poem from this collection, which is the titular poem, The Night is Darkening Round Me, number 25 in this little book, okay? And it goes, The night is darkening round me, the wild winds coldly blow, but a tyrant's spell has bound me, and yet I cannot go. And I cannot go. The giant trees are bending, their bare boughs weighed with snow, and the storm is fast descending, and yet I cannot go. Clouds beyond, clouds above me, wastes beyond, wastes below, but nothing drear can move me. I will not, cannot go. I'll come when thou art saddest, laid alone in the darkened room, when the mad day's mirth has vanished, and the smile of joy is banished from evening's chilly gloom. I'll come when the heart's real feeling has entire unbiased sway, and my influence over thee stealing, grief, deepening joy congealing, shall bear thy soul away. Listen, 'tis just the hour, the awful time for thee. Dost thou not feel upon thy soul a flood of strange sensations roll, forerunners of a sterner power, heralds of me? I would have touched the heavenly key that spoke alike of bliss and thee. I would have woke the entrancing song, but its words had died upon my tongue. And then I knew that hallowed strain could never speak of joy again. And then I felt. So I would love to hear who some of your favorite poets are. I have been reading some Mary Oliver this month in September, and I've really been loving her. But I'd love to hear your favorites and what you've read in August, what you plan to read in September maybe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you stay cool in this horrible heat, and have a great rest of your day.